So let's look at this. Now, just an overview of the tongues. Tongues, the gift of tongues was mentioned only in the earliest of the New Testament books, book of Acts and 1 Corinthians. And these are two of the earliest books written in the New Testament. After you get past Acts and 1 Corinthians, there is no more mention of the gift of tongues. Peter does not mention tongues, nor does James, nor does John, nor does Jude in the pastoral epistles, which is really noteworthy. In letters that were written to pastors of churches to tell them how to do church, no mention of the gift of tongues. The early church fathers, Chrysostom, Origen, and Augustine, all affirmed the cessation of the gift of tongues. And you didn't see tongues again until a really odd group known as the Montanists cropped up. This was a 2nd century group built upon new prophecy. They were known for losing bodily control. The Montanists followed a guy named Montanus, hence the name, and they were known for getting into these ecstatic, frenzied states where they would basically lose bodily control. Reports are that their eyes would roll back and they would flop on the ground. They would jerk and shake and go into basically seizure-type behavior, just very, very odd. They spoke in the first person for God, claimed to get continued divine revelation. It was a heretical group, small group, but very heretical. And so after the Montanists, you didn't see tongues again all throughout church history at all for about 1,500 years. It wasn't until the Camisards came upon this. Were a group of, it was a militant Protestant group in southern France, and they fought against the persecution that was brought about by King Louis XIV and his Edict of Fontainebleau that revoked religious freedom for the Protestants. And so the Camisards were kind of a militant Protestant group that fought against King Louis XIV, the Fontainebleau. But they were, in and of themselves, even though they were Protestant, they were still heretical. They had their own doctrinal issues. You had a group called the Jansenists, and the Jansenists was kind of almost an answer to the Camisards. The Jansenists were a militant Roman Catholic group. They claimed to speak in tongues. And then you saw tongues with a group called the Shakers. Some of you may remember hearing a little bit about the Shakers in your history classes. Hold on just a second. Okay. All right. Let's try this again. Okay. So the Shakers, this was an American sect founded in 1747 by a woman named Ann Lee. Now there's your first clue. Anytime you have a religious group or some kind of sect that is founded by a woman, then you know automatically that it's a heretical group, right? Because God has ordained it that men are to be the spiritual leaders in both the home and the church. Women have obviously same access to God, made in the image of God, just as we as men are. But God, and we have equal value, but God has assigned us different roles, and He has deemed it and decreed it that men are to be the spiritual leaders in the church. So anytime you have a group, a religious group or sect that is begun by a woman, you know automatically that this is a fringe, kooky, heretical group. And the Shakers certainly were. And it's the Seventh-day Adventist as well. They were begun by a woman. So that's, kind of write that off immediately. But at any rate, the Shakers grew out of the Quakers, but the Shakers were begun by Mother Ann Lee. That was her name. That's how they referred to her, Mother Ann Lee. And I'm going to show you a picture of Mother Ann Lee. Try not to laugh. That's her. I mean, that's the images that I could find from Mother Ann Lee. That all of the images look just like. Now, to me, that looks like a dude. That looks like a. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe Mother Ann Lee was born about 300 years too soon, because she would have fit right into our society nowadays. But Mother Ann Lee fancied herself, assuming she was a woman, fancied herself as a female Jesus Christ. She believed that God could be found not outside of us, but within ourselves. That's pantheism and even panentheism. Thoroughly heretical. Now, the Shakers believed that sex, even within marriage, was sinful, was immoral. And so, as you might imagine, if they outlawed sex even within marriage, recruitment was a bit of a challenge for the Shakers. They maintained their numbers through supposed conversions and then adoption. I mean, literally, even married couples were not allowed to have sex. And the Shakers got their name because in their worship services they would shake. They would literally just go around shaking like this. They prophesied, they claimed to speak in tongues, and they also denied the Trinity. They believed that Christ was not a person, but rather a spirit, and the Holy Spirit is not a person, according to the Shakers. He was just the power of God on earth. And absolute celibacy. If a married couple wanted to join the Shakers for some odd reason, they would have to deny their marriage and live separately. Husband and wives would have to live separately. So they also talked to the dead. They got into necromancy, talking to dead people. So very, very odd group. But they claim to be able to speak in tongues. And they claim to be able to do it just like Charismatics do today. The Mormons, believe it or not, also spoke in tongues. This is an excerpt from the Pittsburgh Dispatch dated April 12, 1892, dealing with the Mormons. The title there is Awaiting a Revelation. Mormons listen to elders speaking in unknown tongues. And when you read this article, Mormon elders were speaking in tongues. They were even singing in tongues, and they would claim physical healings. So what is that telling us? You're starting to see that tongues and even physical healings are claimed by groups that are distinctly and definitively non-Christian. So that tells us that just because someone is exhibiting these behaviors is not necessarily an indication that that ability is coming from God. Pagans do it too. In fact, there are a number of pagan religions that speak in tongues, that shake, that jerk, that get slain in the spirit. Let me show you an example of this.